Within 24 hours, the mountain was crawling with searchers. Over 200 people, helicopters, dogs, professional trackers combed the trails. They scoured creeks, drop-offs, ravines. Rangers stayed out past midnight with headlamps and walkie-talkies. But there was no Jared.
The Appalachian Trail, often called the AT, is a continuous hiking trail stretching approximately 2,198 miles across 14 states in the eastern United States. It begins at Springer Mountain in Georgia and ends at Mount Katahdin in Maine. The trail passes through diverse landscapes including forests, mountains, rivers, and valleys, crossing several national parks and wilderness areas such as the Great Smoky Mountains and Shenandoah National Parks. The AT is maintained by a combination of federal agencies, nonprofit organizations, and thousands of volunteers. It is primarily used for hiking and backpacking, attracting both short-distance day hikers and long-distance through hikers who attempt to hike the entire trail in one continuous trip. The trail is known for its natural beauty, physical challenges, and the strong community of hikers and volunteers that support it. But it is also known for its missing persons cases and paranormal stories told by the locals.
On July 18, 1991, Negrete went with 5 fellow Boy Scouts and a troop leader on a camping trip, his first overnight backpacking trip. Free 4. The next day, on the trail to the summit of Mount San Gorgonio, Negrete had trouble keeping up with the other scouts due to lack of experience with hiking. The scout troop decided to hike ahead of Negrete at a faster pace, leaving him behind. He got separated from his group, and other hikers and witnesses later reported that he was seen taking shortcuts in the switchback sections, which led to speculation that he possibly fell down the mountainside or took a wrong trail and got lost. It was reported that the scout troop leader interacted with hikers who expressed concern for Negrete. He told them that he would check on his scout on the way back down the summit with the rest of the troop. 5. Negrete was last seen at 6 p.m. by another hiker, a Santa Ana firefighter, who warned him about straying from the trail and told him to stay on marked paths. 7. He was last seen wearing green Boy Scout pants with a tan-colored t-shirt, possibly a Boy Scout-style t-shirt, and with black high-top tennis shoes. The scout leader conducted a search for Negrete before hiking 12 miles, 19 kilometers in darkness to report his disappearance that night. Search for Negrete began at 7 a.m. on July 20th, 1991, with authorities using helicopters and on-foot personnel to scour the area. On July 21, search personnel discovered footprints believed to match Negrete's tennis shoes at about the 10,000-foot level. Searchers described the location as one of loose rocks, slippery slopes, and along the ravines and lower slopes, thick vegetation. 11 tracker Francis Lawson stated, "If you stay on the trail, there's no problem, but the minute you get off, you can get swept down in a rock slide." 11. July 24, the firefighter who last saw Negrete on July 19th assisted searchers and led them to the location of their encounter on Vivian Creek Trail at the 10,200-foot level. On July 27, search personnel located Negrete's disposable Kodak camera 45 feet, 14 minutes off Vivian Creek Trail. Authorities developed 12 snapshots from the camera. Both surrounding landscape and were taken before his disappearance, but the last image was a close-up of Negrete's face taken after he disappeared. 15. Only his eyes and nose are visible in the photograph, and it was possibly taken at night as the camera flash activated. As the the search combed the area of the 11,500-foot Mount San Gorgonio. Also found was his backpack, beef jerky, candy wrappers, and a camera, but Negrete was not located. Authorities stated that there was evidence Jared had the jerky when he disappeared. On August 4th, after 16 days, The search for Negrete was officially called off by authorities. He was presumed dead with the chance of survival almost nil. Negrete's family held a memorial service for him on September 7, 1991, in Hacienda Heights. The service was attended by 500 relatives and fellow members of the local Mormon church.
Another interesting story is about the Brown Mountain Lights. The Brown Mountain Lights are supposedly ghost lights near Brown Mountain in North Carolina. One of the earliest sightings of the lights dates from September 24th, 1913. An old woman named Anderson Loven reported mysterious red lights seen just above the mountains every night. They said she was a reliable woman who never lied. Congressmen started a government investigation and found that some headlights of locomotives that passed on the railroad would have been visible from Loven's hotel. They were left in no doubt that these were the cause of the lights. In 1916, a flood caused train activity to cease for several weeks near Brown Mountain. George Anderson Loven told the Lenoir News that it was still being seen every night. Some people speculate it being UFOs, and some say it's just car headlights. Speaking of the Appalachian region, it has a large history of aliens and UFO sightings documented in books, podcasts, and online forums. Countless people have reported to have been abducted by aliens. There's a bunch of TV series that go in depth on these, and these sightings are still appearing today. In September of 1961, Betty and Barney Hill were driving from Montreal, Canada to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, on the way home from their belated honeymoon. While driving through the White Mountains of New Hampshire, the couple experienced an extraterrestrial phenomenon that would launch them into the international spotlight and help shape the dialogue around future supernatural encounters. Betty and Barney Hill both worked long hours in Portsmouth. Betty was a social worker who handled child welfare cases, and Barney was a postal worker who often drove 60 miles a day and worked the night shift. In addition to their full-time jobs, the couple also volunteered frequently. As an interracial couple before those unions were fully accepted, the Hills were passionate about advancing the civil rights movement. They volunteered at their local church and were both members of the NAACP. After deciding to take a well-deserved break, the Hills planned a spontaneous road trip from Montreal to Niagara Falls. Though the couple had been married for 16 months, they had never been on their honeymoon and viewed this trip as the opportune time. They got in their car and impulsively left for the 3-day trip, without even stopping by the bank to get extra money. On the last night of their trip, the Hills departed a diner in Vermont around 10 p.m., hoping to make it back to Portsmouth around 2 a.m. However, as they drove, they noticed a bright light in the sky that appeared to be following them. With every mile they drove, the light grew bigger and brighter. As a World War II veteran and a plane enthusiast, Barney Hill did not think much of the light at first. As it was the middle of the night, he figured the light could not be coming from a commercial plane or a helicopter, and assumed it was just a satellite that had gone off course. Nonetheless, the light continued to follow them, even as they drove through the winding roads of the White Mountains. Sometimes the light would move behind the trees and disappear, only to reappear moments later. Eventually, the couple grew so curious that they decided to pull over and investigate. Through a pair of binoculars, Betty realized that the light was not a satellite and was actually some sort of object spinning in the air, presumably a flying saucer. Barney also grew concerned. As a pragmatic, intellectual man, he was skeptical of any extraterrestrial explanation, but he had no alternative guess as to what the light could be. The couple continued driving until they reached Route 3 in Lincoln, when the object hovered just over 100 feet above the car. Barney abruptly stopped, got out of the car with a handgun, and saw something that was as big as a jet but as flat as a pancake. Behind the windows of the object were beings in gray uniforms who told Barney to put down his binoculars. He tried to raise his pistol but somehow found himself unable to. Realizing that he was about to be captured, he ran back to the car and sped off. At some point, Betty and Barney Hill heard strange beeping noises from their trunk, felt drowsy, and eventually lost consciousness. Betty Hill's drawing of the alien spacecraft. The next morning, the couple woke up in their house in Portsmouth with no recollection of the events that occurred the night before. However, Barney's shoes had been scuffed, Betty's dress had been torn, and both of their watches had stopped working. Trying to piece together what happened, Betty spent hours in the library reading about the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP, a civilian UFO group. She also filed a report to the Air Force concerned about radiation. In the next couple of years, the couple suffered from disturbing dreams and anxiety. They began seeing a psychiatrist named Benjamin Simon, who helped them piece together what had happened on that night. Betty Hill's dress. Through months of sessions and hypnosis, a popular technique at the time, the couple began to recall what happened to them. According to the Hills, the UFO had landed on their car as they were speeding down the mountains and put them to sleep. Afterwards, the gray beings they had seen earlier had led them up a long ramp into the spacecraft. Once inside, the Hills were separated and individually tested. They were asked to climb on a metal table and remove their clothes, where the gray beings would pluck their hairs, take clippings from their nails, and peel off parts of their skin. Each sample was placed on something that resembled a glass slide. The gray beings also probed needles into their arms, legs, and heads. Betty recalled that one needle was even inserted into her stomach as a pregnancy test. Throughout the ordeal, Betty and Barney Hill claimed that one of the beings was the leader who was observing the process from the side. Later, alone with the leader, Betty asked where the craft had flown. Under hypnosis, she replicated the star map shown to her on the ship. Years later, a woman named Marjorie Fish attempted to interpret Betty's reproduction of the map and concluded that the beings had come from the star system Zeta Reticuli. Though the story of Betty and Barney Hill was not the first tale of alien abduction, theirs was the most well-documented and feasibly legitimate. After this encounter, Betty Hill continued doing research on UFOs for the remainder of her life, and the story of the Hills became one of the most widely publicized alien encounters in history. It even shaped the way alien encounters are discussed today in the media. Before the Hills experience, aliens were portrayed as friendly creatures who would commute back and forth between Earth and their home planets. However, after the Hills shared their story, alien abductions became better known for their mystery and intrigue. Alien movies and sci-fi novels like The X-Files started to include common tropes, such as medical examinations and missing time. Although the Hills have both since passed away, their legacy and the events that occurred in the White Mountains in 1961 have not been forgotten. There are also legends of various cryptids in Appalachia. A cryptid is a creature whose existence is disputed or unsubstantiated by science, but is believed to exist by some based on folklore, anecdotal evidence, or sightings. One example of a cryptid formed in the Appalachian Trails is the moon-eyed people. These little strange people are said to only come out at night because the daylight is too strong for their eyes. Outside the name moon-eyed people, they were said to come near your house at night and gather all your corn. The people inside can hear them talking, but you must not go out or look at them, or they will leave and never tend to your crops again. According to believers, they are said to have built a fort mountain, a fort that no one knows who built. According to a 1969 newspaper article, the Cherokee tribe chief told a visitor that the cité was built by little white men from across the river. Some evidence has been found of these people, like mini-sized skeletal remains, and some travelers have said to encounter white people or very small people, perfectly white. In some books, the Cherokees are said to have slaughtered little white people, which could explain their disappearance. Another cryptid made in Appalachia would be is an Appalachian critter called a knot deer or not a deer. The knot deer appeared on Tumblr in 2019 and eventually became a popular subject on Cryptid Talk, TikTok. The creature is said to mostly look like a deer until you really look and find that it's not. The creature displays unsettling characteristics that scare the heck out of people today. They have odd features or make robotic movements or unnatural sounds, and often are said to exhibit predator-like qualities. Modern stories of not deer frequently include reports of them walking on their hind legs, an atypical sight that is particularly unnerving to see, apparently. The overdramatic modern take on not deer is that they are supernatural shapeshifters. Their growing popularity, mostly via content creators sharing stories and repeating and embellishing tales of the not deer, is running parallel to the rise of the Appalachian folk horror genre. However, an unexpected find in a decades-old magazine revealed that the fear of strange deer has been around for a long time. I lived in Waynesboro, Virginia for about 5 years, less than 10 miles to the BRP North entrance, Skyline Drive South entrance. I used to take bike rides along SD all the time, and always kept a year-long membership. Only in the day, though, just to frame the story. One night, I was having a particularly hard time settling in for bed, so I decided to start up the bike and ride up to the first overlook on Skyline, only about a mile inside the park. It was about 11 p.m. when I got up there, and pitch black. I killed the bike and got immediately uncomfortable. I'm not a guy that gets spooked in the dark. Truthfully, I prefer the dark in most situations. You can see people before they see you. You are practically invisible unless someone is looking for you, and I find the natural privacy comforting. Not up there, though. It was a thick, oppressive dark. Worse than anything I experienced outside of a cave, and worse than any moonless night on the Appalachian Trail. I immediately got hinked out, big time. There's nothing up here besides wildlife, I reassured myself internally. I had my .44 Magnum revolver from when I lived, hiked in the Pacific Northwest bear country and all that jazz, tucked into my concealed carry holster, so I knew I definitely outmatched anything that could be up there. Two-legged snakes included. So I sat in the dark, leaning against the bike for a while and looking at the few lights I could see in the valley below. I managed about 10 minutes before I physically felt the hair raise on the back of my neck. I only did 27 months in Iraq, but I remembered that precise feeling. Someone was watching me. Something bad was coming. It was the same sensation I would get before IDF came in or the shooting started somewhere nearby. I'm no psychic or whatever, but it's a common thing among vets with any time under their belt. Ask them about it. You can feel hateful eyes on you. The overlook was a sheer drop, or nearly so I wasn't concerned about anything popping up in that direction, but the mountainside and thick, untamed woods were behind me. I started thinking about method out dudes creeping the Appalachian Trail, bears, and the like. The AT is no stranger to random violence. Still feeling creeped out, I took up a seat on the waist-high stone wall that marked the overlook ledge facing the woods. Again, I can't emphasize how dark it was. But Grizz, you might say, why not turn on the bike and use the lights? It'll at least help you see what's close. True, but my bike is loud, and the last thing I wanted was attention. Plus, the light would just night blind me to anything just out of view, and the noise would obscure any stealthy sounding creeping going on. So, no thanks. I'll watch and listen for a bit. I sat in the dark for another 10 minutes or so, anxiety getting worse and worse. I heard a few things, but nothing out of the ordinary for a night in the woods. I decided to head on home since the feeling wasn't going away. Like I said, I had a big bore on me, so anything playing games would be in for a powerful surprise if the games got stupid. Hopping onto my Suzuki, I started it up and rode off towards the gate. Now, anyone who lives in the country and rides a bike knows that wildlife is crazy active on roads that aren't traveled often at night. Being nighttime and technically closed, I had to ride around a gate to get in. There were no other vehicles on the road at all. I hadn't seen a single other person since leaving Waynesboro proper. The speed limit was 30 miles per hour, but I clipped along at a measly 15 miles per hour to keep an eye out for deer and wildlife. It wouldn't do my any good to fuck myself up in a wreck, only to lay there all night until someone happened to cross me in the morning. Then I saw it. The term of almost deer is really fitting, not but quite accurate. It was like a deer that someone who had never seen a deer drew, but only after someone else described it to them. It stood on the left side of the road, mountainside, and I saw the eyes long before my headlights shone it fully. It was big, easily the biggest deer I've seen, and the lack of any horns that time in the year suggested that it was a doe. The head was almost bovine in shape, but fixed to a deer's frame. The legs seemed too long in proportion to the body. Think maned wolf proportions. And the body was extremely barrel-chested. I've always been creeped out by malformed wildlife, and this was no exception. Unfortunately, I had to get it to move, or risk passing within a few feet of it. I was not traveling another 30-plus miles up the road in the other direction to leave through another gate in the middle of the night, and I wasn't getting close to it. Dangers of it spooking and running into the side of my cruiser aside, I didn't want to get near it at all. Stopping and putting my feet down about 30 feet away from it, I tried to frighten it away. I flashed my beams down to low and back to high. Nothing. I revved the engine. Nothing. I honked the considerable horn. Nada. Resting the bike on the kickstand, I left it idling and hopped off. I yelled at the thing and it still didn't budge, so I started to the side of the road to grab something to toss near the deer thing, hoping to spook it that way. As soon as I crossed into the other lane, it rose up onto its hind legs. I froze, putting my hand on my gun. I wasn't about to get charged by an angry, confused, malformed doe. It took 2 jerky, unnatural steps towards the center of the lane on 2 legs, and froze again, staring directly at me. It suddenly shook, its head wildly like a dog with the toy, took another short step, then hopped on 2 legs several times until it disappeared into the darkness on the right side of the road. I stepped back to the bike, mounted it, kicked up the kickstand, and turned the light towards the side of the road. On that side, there was a sheer drop-off about 75 to 80 degrees compared to the roadway, and the fucking thing's head was just peeking over the edge, still looking at me. The drop-off was about 40 to 50 feet, so there's no way it was standing at the base of the mountainside. I cracked the throttle and beat the hell out of there. Road wildlife be damned. I never went back up on Skyline Drive at night alone after that. One time was enough. There are things we don't groke out there, or things that just visit for a while. Whatever it wasn't from around these here parts in Hill Talk. It can go back to wherever it came from and stay there. This was a Redditor story from the subreddit Appalachia. An explanation to these deer acting weird could be a disease called chronic wasting disease, CWD, or more commonly known as zombie deer disease. Chronic wasting disease, CWD, is a fatal neurological illness occurring in North American cervids, members of the deer family, including white-tailed deer, mule deer, elk, and moose. Since its discovery in 1967, CWD has spread geographically and increased in prevalence locally. CWD is contagious. It can be transmitted freely within and among cervid populations. No treatments or vaccines are currently available. Chronic wasting disease is of great concern to wildlife managers. It has been detected in at least 23 states, 2 Canadian provinces, and South Korea. CWD is not known to infect livestock or humans. CWD is transmitted directly through the animal-to-animal contact and indirectly through contact with objects or environment contaminated with infectious material, including saliva, urine, feces, and carcasses of CWD-infected animals. Symptoms include severe weight loss, excessive drooling, excessive thirst, a lack of fear in humans, and weird, erratic behavior like spinning around in circles until they starve, walking into the bottom of lakes, and drowning and stumbling. These symptoms match the knot deer's behavior pretty well, and could be the reason these deer act like this. This disease was present in Appalachia, where the knot deer's legend started. In American folklore, Mothman is a humanoid creature that was reportedly seen around Point Pleasant, West Virginia, from November 15, 1966 to December 15, 1967. Despite its name, the original sightings of the creature described avian features. The first newspaper report was published in the Point Pleasant Register, dated November 16, 1966, titled, "Couples See Man-Sized Bird, Creature, Something." The national press soon picked up the reports and helped spread the story across the United States. The source of the legend is believed to have originated from sightings of out-of-migration sandhill cranes or herons. On November 15, 1966, 2 young couples were joyriding around in a black 1957 Chevy to a remote hangout spot north of Point Pleasant known as the TNT area. One of the couples was Linda Scarberry and Roger Scarberry. The other was Steve Mallet and Mary Mallet. When they got there next to the abandoned North Power Plant, they suddenly saw 2 large red eyes which reflected the light from the car's headlights. Steve noticed it first and pointed it out to the group. That is when they are said to have noticed that the glowing red eyes belonged to a strange creature. They claim to have seen a gray man-like figure with wings go around the corner at the old power plant. They said that the creature didn't run, but wobbled like it couldn't keep its balance. Linda described the creature as having circular, fiery red eyes and a body like a man, but with wings. They said the creature was about 6 or 7 feet tall, with wings folded against its back. Half man, half monster. She said, you could see muscles in its legs. The couples couldn't believe what they had seen. They quickly drove off onto Route 62. Linda yelled for Roger to hurry. The couples then saw the creature on a hill by a large billboard as they went round a curve. It spread its wings and went straight up into the air. They were all terrified and kept yelling for the driver to go faster. The Mothman began gliding back and forth over the back end of their car. We didn't know what it was. I don't think we've ever been so scared, said Linda. As they went along a straight stretch of road, they were going over 100 miles per hour, but the creature was still able to follow them. They saw it in the back window and saw the shadow go across the car as it flew. They couldn't get away from it. They could also hear the wings hitting the top of the cars they drove. It's even said to have left scratch marks on Roger's '57 Chevy. It squeaked like a big mouse, said Mary Mallet. They were only able to get away from the Mothman when they reached the edge of Point Pleasant. The creature disappeared, veering off into a field as they went into town. The couples continued going into town. They stopped at the local Dairyland as they tried to figure out what to do next. Linda suggested they go to the police, but Steve and Roger thought they'd just laugh at them and wanted to go back to make sure the thing was still there first. The group ended up being too afraid to do that, so they turned around. As they were turning around, they saw a large dead dog laying along the road, which was gone when they went by again later. According to the couples, the winged creature jumped out as they passed where the dead dog was, went over the top of the car, and went through the field on the other side. They drove back into town and parked at Tiny's Diner and decided to contact the police. The teens told their story to Deputy Millard Halstead. They told police that they saw a large winged creature whose eyes glowed red when the car headlights picked it up. They described it as a flying man with 10-foot wings following their car. Halstead didn't believe them at first, but knew that weren't troublemakers and saw that they were genuinely terrified, so he actually went out to investigate their story. The couples drove back out to the TNT area with the deputy. Millard shined a spotlight around the area, including the tree lines. Deputy Halstead is said to have heard strange static disturbances coming from his radio that he couldn't explain, but he found no clear sign of the creature itself. The witnesses were sitting in their car and said that they saw shadows circling nearby and a cloud of dust kick up from an adjacent coal yard. The Mallets were too scared to go back to their homes. They stayed at the Scarberry's trailer, turned all the lights on, and stayed awake all night from fear. The following day, Sheriff George Johnson held a press conference to discuss the sightings. The local press began printing the story and named the creature Mothman, based on the comic book character, Batman, who had just gotten a television series at the time. Steve Millett told the local newspaper, "We understand people are laughing at us, but we wouldn't make up all this to make us look like fools." The same day, the couples went back to the TNT area during daylight and found odd-looking tracks resembling two horseshoes put together, but smooth. Steve saw something fly up inside a boiler when a door was kicked open. No one stayed around long enough to see what it was. After this original sighting, more and more people began reporting seeing similar things, such as Marcella Bennett's sighting, which happened a day later. Hundreds of cars full of eager people swarmed out to the TNT area at night in hopes of seeing the Mothman. A shadow was cast of the valley of Point Pleasant, and thus began the legacy of West Virginia's Mothman. Another sighting had more bizarre results. At about 10:30 on that same evening, Newell Partridge, a local building contractor who lived in Salem, about 90 miles from Point Pleasant, was watching television when the screen suddenly went dark. He stated that a weird pattern filled the screen, and then he heard a loud, whining sounds from outside that raised in pitch and then ceased. It sounded like a generator winding up, he later stated. Partridge's dog Bandit began to howl out on the front porch, and Newell went out to see what was going on. When he walked outside, he saw Bandit facing the hay barn about 150 yards from the house. Puzzled, Partridge turned a flashlight in that direction and spotted two red circles that looked like eyes or bicycle reflectors. They moving red orbs were certainly not animals' eyes, he believed, and the sight of them frightened him. Bandit, an experienced hunting dog and protective of his territory, shot off across the yard in pursuit of the glowing eyes. Partridge called for him to stop, but the animal paid no attention. His owner turned and went back into the house for his gun, but then was too scared to go back outside again. He slept that night with his gun propped up next to the bed. The next morning, he realized that Bandit had disappeared. The dog had still not shown up 2 days later when Partridge read in the newspaper about the sightings in Point Pleasant that night. One statement that he read in the newspaper chilled him to the bone. Roger Scarberry, one member of the group who spotted the strange bird at the TNT plant, said that as they entered the city limits of Point Pleasant, they saw the body of a large dog lying on the side of the road. This links the two stories together and could be major proof. Now, how weird is that? Two people that don't even know each other having information that links together about the disappearance of Newell's dog.